Whoa.
We're on. Good morning, everyone. Thanks again for coming. I know it's hopefully it's a great week for you. It has for us, and I know there's only a few sessions left, but I really appreciate you coming to this one.
Anybody go to the party last night? Yeah, was that good? Yeah, hopefully you didn't drink too much. You got some neurons still functioning this morning. You're gonna need them. If you don't worry. We will jolt them into action with some amazing technology.
That's exactly right. By the way, my name's Eamon O'Reilly. I work on the automation team for System Center and Azure.
And I'm Jeffrey Snover. I'm Distinguished Engineer and Lead Architect for Windows Server and the System Center products, Data Center products.
So great. So what we're going to cover today is we're really going to look at what is happening in our automation space around System Center, around Windows Server, and in Azure. And what's kind of setting the investments that we're making for Windows Server 2016, as well as what we're doing inside of System Center and Azure over the next year. And so you'll start to see, what are the trends that are happening in the automation space across the industry, and how we're actually looking at those and making sure we're building the right platform and then the right products on top of that allows you to actually embrace a lot of these new trends and new demands that a lot of your end users have on IT as we look forward. And so that's going to be the big thing. We're going to kind of focus on a few key areas. We're going to go through a lot of the investments that PowerShell has been making, and they've been making a lot, as you know, for the last few years. And Jeffrey's going to talk about, what's coming in vNext. So if you haven't seen that, there's some really cool stuff there. And then from the System Center Azure side, we're actually taking a lot of those core investments that are being made at that platform and really trying to build out products and solutions that you can actually use inside your own organization. And so that's going to be a main focus as we go through the next hour and 10 minutes or so. And we have a fair amount of content and some demos mixed in. So hopefully you have a good session and you can ask us some questions at the end, and we'd really appreciate it.
Yeah, recently someone asked me about, person asked me, geez, Microsoft's not the leader in the cloud. How are you going to make up that gap? And my answer was very simple. Microsoft is a very simple beast. We have one playbook, and we're extraordinarily good at it. And that playbook is platform, products, platform, partners, and products. We build a great platform that then our partners can take and do their best work on our platform to deliver great solutions to customers. And then we have products which do the same. So we have products, and so what we're going to talk to you about today is both the great platform that we've been building for quite some time now around manageability, and now how System Center, the product, can take advantage of that to deliver a final solution to you. You see sometimes the platform is for developers or you've got to do a lot of scripting yourself, and sometimes most people just want to just say, give me a solution. So you're going to see both come together today.
Great. So I'm going to have a slide just that really talks about what are we seeing in the automation space across the industry. And it really kind of level sets, hopefully, everyone on how we're thinking about our investments as we go forward over the next year and why we've made some of the investments in the past. Because really what we're seeing is there's such a demand on automation and management of all these different systems that we had to invest wisely in actually getting the platform right and then getting the products right so you could actually use them as you go forward. So one of the first things we've seen, and you've probably seen it yourselves over the last few years, is that everyone is starting to adopt these cloud technologies. And a lot of these clouds, have been around for a while, but we've really pushed private clouds and actually enable you inside your own data center to actually deliver that end user expectation around self-service. We had these challenges in the last few years where we had this idea of shadow IT come up. And it really came up around because we weren't able as an IT organization to actually deliver to our end users what they needed in a self-service way. And so we've been building a lot of tools inside of System Center and leveraging a lot of capabilities in Windows Server with the Azure Pack, and you saw some other announcements today, to really start to deliver solutions you inside the data center can offer out to your end users to get that self-service capability. And then the other big push around what clouds have done, which is what we'll talk about later on today, is this whole idea of DevOps. And it's only starting up, but you can already see it's very similar. I was thinking of a story. I was talking to someone last night around how this used to be very similar to the way we used to do the private clouds. Shadow IT came up because we couldn't, as IT, deliver the virtual machines and deliver the infrastructure on demand.
Right.
And so they started to, go around the clouds and start going to Amazon or Azure. And then we kind of said, okay, we can actually deliver it from IT. We just need the right tools and the right capabilities and thinking. And we actually started to deliver those. And then the DevOps is starting to come up.
By the way, on that, I have a joke about, chainsaw applied to tree, good, chainsaw applied to leg, bad, right? So a lot of times, if your users, your customers aren't getting what they need from you, out of IT, and in particular that if you're not delivering them self-service solutions where they can get what they need on a very agile basis, then some cloud provider is going to do that for them. And they're just going to grab their credit card and go use a public cloud and then go create a mess that then you are going to end up having to clean up. Because I guarantee you when a user just uses a public cloud, they're not thinking about the data maintenance, the provisioning, the security, all that kind of governance stuff that you as IT pros are responsible for. But that's what they need. They need self-service. So now we're going to show you how you can deliver self-service solution to your users in a way that then takes care of all those things. So you can get out ahead of this and avoid them creating a mess that ultimately you're going to be responsible for cleaning up anyway.
Yep, and the DevOps, I feel, is heading the same direction where they want this continuous deployment, because they're under pressure. Like the customers we're serving from the IT, they're under pressure as well to actually get new features, new capabilities out all the time. And so they want to get this idea of I want to be able to implement a feature and get it out into production as fast as possible. And if it takes me forever to hand everything off and then operations has to look at it and it takes a month or two, then they're going to start figuring out other tools and other ways to get it out. So we really want to enable you to actually give all of those compliance type requirements, but actually still enable the DevOps scenarios where you can release features really quickly. It isn't just the infrastructure, which was a lot of what the clouds initially were. It's more on the applications and the infrastructure configured the right way for them. And so the other big trend we're seeing at the moment is what I kind of put in a bucket of modern management. And this is really as you start to embrace a lot of different clouds. So you may have your own private clouds, but as you start to embrace other public clouds, you really need to start thinking about how can I actually change my management so I can actually manage across all these different environments. And so one of the things we're starting to see is, can we deliver actually management as a service? And so that can actually scale with you as you bring all those different clouds together, because you're no longer responsible for all the infrastructure. If you have operations manager, how many management groups are you going to stand up to actually support all of this? And even using Orchestrator, are you going to keep adding all the runbook servers and then you have to maintain them and patch them? And it just creates its own work on just maintaining the infrastructure. So one of our goals is that we actually start moving towards management as a service so that you can scale as your customers need to scale across all these different clouds.
Yeah, does anybody here run SMS or SCCM? Yeah, right. So, and if you've ever gone to the MMS, the early days of the Microsoft Management Summit, Summit Conference, it's like 33% of the conferences, the sessions were all about the care and feeding of setting that thing up. You want to approach it gently from the side, talk to it smooth. And it's very complex to set up. And in fact, does that add any value? And the answer is no, you want to use it. You don't want to be an expert at setting things up.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And then the other trend we're seeing is this move to actually have automation manage a heterogeneous environment. So I don't know how many of you have Linux in your environments, but I bet almost everybody does.
Right.
And
anybody? Linux?
Yeah, and it's just the way things are going. And it's not just heterogeneous environments across the OSs. So you have Windows and Linux. You may even have other mainframes you're responsible for. But then the management systems are also quite different on top of those tools. And so we're seeing this environment inside your data center where you have to actually automate and integrate to all these systems and all these OSs. And we really want to build you an automation capability at the platform level and at the product level so that you can actually invest all of your time into one automation that can actually tie all these different systems together. And then, of course, the last thing that's almost built into all of these things is as you start to do all of this automation, you start to actually deliver this self-service, you really need this automation to be able to perform at scale. So as you do more and more, it needs to grow as you start to invest more in all of this automation through the PowerShell work or through other automation you're building with System Center or into Azure. And so we wanted to build an automation that can actually scale with you, no matter how big your organization is. So I'm going to hand over to you, Jeffrey, for a second, just talk about this slide. And you mentioned a little bit about the platform work initially, but it kind of sets, our investments in Windows Server and then how we build on those.
Yeah, exactly. It's sort of what I said before. Sorry, I jumped the gun. I got too excited. So this really is our architecture, right? We build a platform, we put that in Windows, and then we make it available down levels through something called the Windows Management Framework. So the same platform, same APIs, same set of features are available on down level systems. Now, some of you may have noticed this week an interesting announcement. We announced Desired State Configuration Agent running on Linux. Okay, so now we think not just of the management platform as a Windows thing, but we see it as a Windows and Linux thing. We've had a WMI equivalent on Linux, something called OMI. We've had that and have been shipping that for a number of years. We've been making it available to people. A number of network switches now ship with our open source OMI technology in it. Right? So we're getting our management platform infrastructure throughout the industry. So what does that entail, right? So we got PowerShell, that's not on Linux yet. We got WMI, we've got standards-based management with WMI and WSMan. We have PowerShell workflows. We have just enough administration, a fine-grained security roles-based authentication model using PowerShell, and our big investment in desired state configuration. Hear a lot about that. And then again, we layer on top, that's our platform, and then we got products and partners. Partners, we've done great work with partners like Chef, Aditi, Guardrail, others in the queue, lots of great stuff there. But we also deliver our own solutions too. The System Center products that you can buy and run yourself, or the Azure services.
Yep. And I gave you this clicker here.
Oh, great. So one of our great partners is Chef. And I had a conversation with the CEO of Chef, Barry Christ, as we were talking about working together. And he said, we've been watching you guys for a while now. And he said, the story of PowerShell is a story of sustained investment. And I really like that. He says, we looked at version 1, and honestly, sometimes Microsoft gets very excited about something, and then the attention span moves to other things. Attention moves on. He says, but that wasn't the case with PowerShell. PowerShell version 1 came out, and it was followed up very quickly by PowerShell version 2 and 3 and 4, and it's an area of sustained investment. And because of that, he was comfortable betting his company on the PowerShell desired state configuration for management of Windows systems. So that was a really interesting perspective, and he was absolutely right. We've been at this for quite a long time. It is an amazing investment that the company's made in these technologies. Really started around 2001, 2002 when I first published the Monad Manifesto. So in product terms, that was around Server 2000. And this laid out the key vision and prototype. Has anybody ever read that document? Oh, no. Okay. Well, not too many. It's an amazing document. I encourage you to go read it. Oh, it really is.
I put my hand up, Jeffrey.
What's that?
I put my hand up just in case.
That's good. It's actually an amazing document. If you read it today, you'll be shocked at the mapping between something written in 2002 and what's still being delivered on today. Pretty stunning. Anyway, so then that was followed up with a version 1. Now this was unlike most version 1s because it took us quite a long time to get out the door. We were really starting from a base, and it shipped with Windows Server 2008. The defining feature was these .NET commandlets. It was a new automation model built on .NET. But in reality, we had a lot of stuff going, right? We had the whole .NET commandlets. We had a full interactive shell. We had a debugger in an interactive shell, very rare thing. We had a language support. Honestly, the language was 10 times greater than I had possibly hoped for. We got some fantastic people on the team, and I'll tell you, they did great work. I'm just so pleased with the work that they did in the language. We had our object pipelines and utilities, the basic system, the namespaces to be able to deal with all of Windows namespaces, the certificate store, the registry, etc. You can navigate all those. Had security, adaptive system help. It was a very substantial V1, unlike a lot of V1s. But we continued. In PowerShell version 2, we had it remoting, a ton more stuff in this space. But now, all of a sudden, people could really start to do multi-machine management using PowerShell version 2. And a lot of people that I talk to are still using this and being very successful with it. In PowerShell version 3, however, that's when we really crossed the chasm. In PowerShell version 1, I think we shipped with, what was it, 100 and some odd commandlets, and in version 2, we shipped with 200 and some odd commandlets. PowerShell version 3, we shipped with over 2,400 commandlets. So we always wanted to get to a world where, with PowerShell where someone could think about what they want, type it, and get it. And with PowerShell version 3, we really got there. Because if you don't have that, you can get the job done, but you have to do scripting, right? You have to go find your WMI object, you have to find your COM object, call a .NET API. And whereas advanced scripters really love that, the bulk of the marketplace said, I'm just trying to get my job done. I just want to think something, type it, and get it. And with PowerShell version 3 and Windows Server 2012, you could do that. Again, that was a massive release. I won't read through all that. I'll just highlight a couple things. So the first was this idea of the DLR, the Dynamic Language Runtime, and something called the AST. So here, basically, it allowed you to do treat the script as a data object and program it and allow what's called metaprogramming. Metaprogramming is programs that generate programs. And this is a technique that is very useful and very powerful. We combine that with things like CDXML and script commandlets, and it's one of the reasons why we got such great coverage, because in PowerShell version 3, we could go to the Windows team, who are really native code programmers, and we say, you can now write your commandlets using WMI in native code, and we will automatically generate your PowerShell commandlets for you. So huge advance there. But we didn't stop there. In PowerShell version 4, we introduced PowerShell desired state configuration. This started as things were moving to the cloud, and I became the lead architect of Windows Server. I said, well, what are the things we have to do to the platform to become a great cloud operating system? And I realized that configuration management was done fundamentally different in the cloud than the traditional enterprise, and we had an opportunity to go clean that up. And so we introduced the desired state configuration specifically for that. Now, just to be clear, the first version of desired state configuration, we adopted this model of agile development. With agile development, it's a model where you want to listen to your customers and iterate rapidly. So there's something called the MVP, the minimal viable product that you get out there. It's the first thing that shows everything working together, and then instead of going and spending 3 years in your head thinking, I bet you they'll want this, I'll bet you they'll want that, you get that minimal viable product out there, and then you ask, what do you want next? What do you want next? What do you want next? So with our first iteration, honestly, it was sort of a version 0.8, maybe a version 0.9. It was really quite minimal, maybe a little too minimal. But we listened to you and got feedback and iterated rapidly and released an update to that platform in November. And honestly, that got us up to, I think, probably a version 1.5, maybe even a 1.6. Really quite solid. But we didn't stop there. In PowerShell version 5, the one we're working on now, the focus really is on DevOps all up. The major pillar of that is desired state configuration. Massive investment in desired state configuration across the board in various teams. But we do more than that. DevOps is more than just desired state configuration. We now make it easy to use package management to be able to find all the resources that you want in your environment. We provide you the ability to create your own repositories and take a look at the public repositories, see which ones, vet them out, see which ones you trust, put them in your repositories, and then tell people to use your repositories as the trusted source. So we've also been integrating in with Azure, with the Azure Extension Agent. So, you know, when you go to Azure and you start up a VM, you can now say, I'd like to have a desired state configuration agent put in there. You can also put other agents. Going forward, when you say, I want to put another agent in there, that will actually be configured using desired state configuration. Yeah, that's right. So basically, Azure is the foundation of the extension model for Azure will be desired state configuration. Anyway, there's a ton of stuff here. I mean, I haven't gone through the details, but very pervasive investment in PowerShell. So PowerShell version 5, Again, huge investment. Here are the key areas. A very strong investment in security. PowerShell's always been very secure. In fact, let's get this in focus. So starting with Bill Gates' memo on trustworthy computing, step after step after step, release after release, we've been locking down the system, turning things off by default, and making things secure by default. There's been exactly one change in direction, and that is with PowerShell. With PowerShell, when we started shipping PowerShell, PowerShell remoting was turned off by default, and you had to turn it on, secure by default. In PowerShell version, I think 3, we switched gears, and on servers, now PowerShell remoting is on by default. Now, why is that? There were 2 reasons. The first was we knew that remote manageability was going to be the way you manage systems. If you saw this week's announcement around NanoServer, you saw what we were talking about. NanoServer is a fully headless system. You cannot log into it. There is no RDP. The only way you can manage it is remotely using WSMan and PowerShell. Okay? So we wanted to turn it on by default. The second is we had enough use of it, right? It's used, it's got by Exchange, by many of our cloud services have public-facing PowerShell interfaces, and we were just confident that we try and keep this quiet, right? We try and be super humble about this, but you notice there's been no real drama around PowerShell and security. You know, knock on wood. The reality is that we have so much confidence in it that we felt confident to make this one exception and now turn PowerShell remoting on by default. Anyway, so we continue to invest in security. We've got a ton of new utilities, a lot of them focused in on the workflows and tasks that people doing DevOps have found that they needed, things like zip, archive commandlets, zip and unzip things. We have convert to parsers, a parse by example. So in those rare occasions where you need to parse by text, you no longer have to do a regular expression. Those are horrible. You can just give an example. You say, oh, here's what the text looks like, and this is and you just put some tags, and you say, here's what's going on. Just give 1 or 2 examples, and this artificial intelligence program will generate a parser for you to then parse the rest of the stuff. It's crazy cool stuff. So we've got a lot of new modules. Now, the interesting thing here is Pester. So in a DevOps world, now people are using PowerShell for more and more formal things. Link runs everything online using PowerShell and PowerShell workflows, and they wanted to make sure that a scripter adhered to a set of guidelines and that when they changed something, that change was a good change. So they invested in a unit test framework, and they invested in these programming tools to be able to analyze the scripts to make sure people were following the rules. Well, we don't want everybody to have to do that. So now we have a PowerShell script analyzer where we're in fact open sourcing the rules. So we started with the rules from the community. They're the community's best guidance. We're now open sourcing the software so that the community can then contribute to those things. And now you can use that to test your scripts. Next, in the unit test framework world, the open source guys had produced one called Pester. And so we looked at that and said, that's actually pretty good. So let's take that. Instead of developing our own, let's reach out to that community and work with them. And I don't know if you saw the announcement here, but for the first time ever, we're taking an open source project and we're shipping it in Windows. Is that crazy? Open source software shipping in Windows. So that was the Pester stuff. Now I looked at this and we said, well, Pester's great, but it's really not everything that we need. We need to extend it for larger, more comprehensive scenarios. And I looked at that and I said, well, yep, we need to do that, but that team over there, that company over there, they have a set of customers. They're deeply invested in PowerShell. Their customers use PowerShell to be successful, and they're going to have the same needs. So why don't we work together? And so I picked up the phone, and I called VMware. I don't know if you know this. VMware is one of the largest PowerShell communities. And so I reached out to VMware and I said, hey, Here's the problem that we see, and here's the approach we're going to take to it. We're going to adopt this open source software. I think you're going to have the same problem, and you're going to see the same thing with Pester and see that it needs the same extensions. Would you like to work with us and jointly take this and evolve it to the benefit of our customers? And they did. And so Pester is a joint development project between Microsoft, VMware, and the community. Crazy stuff. Anyway, lots more stuff there. Let's show you some of my favorites. Okay, so the first thing I want to show you.
7?
Oh, 7, please. I mentioned transcripting. Oh, sorry, I mentioned security. One of the things we have is big data, right? So we now have improved our logging, and so you can do stuff with PowerShell, and it generates it into an event, and you can send that event somewhere, and you can do big data analytics. In fact, you can use Operations Insight to send those events up to the cloud and do searching and querying big data against it. Wonderful tool. However, when you find something suspicious, you're going to want to drill in and do forensics. Okay, I'm pretty sure that little event represents something bad. Now I'd like to understand what was going on. And what I think you'll find with the big data event log tools is it's hard to stitch together exactly what someone did and such. And so a better tool is transcripting. Now PowerShell's had transcripting for quite some time. I should have asked, how many people use PowerShell? Oh, great. So, we've had transcripting for a while, but, it only worked in the console. So here what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start a transcript. Okay, so notice it started. Okay, there's a good file. So we've got a nice random name. We'll run some commands, and then I'm going to stop the transcript, take a look at the value, and that's where it was. Now, take a look here. When I did a stop transcript and assigned it to $X, and it gave me what looked like a string, but when I piped that to get member, you see that it's a string, but we've added a node property, which is actually the path to the command. And what that allows us to do is to say ps edit $X path and just grab that command, because there's no way I was going to remember that number, right, or type it in correctly. So I just run this, and here's what a transcript looks like. So it comes up, tells you the start time, who the user was. If you're running a run as credential, it shows you both who you ran as and who you came in as, the machine, what application, etc. And then the way to think about transcripts is over-the-shoulder viewing. So you're there typing, and I'm looking over your shoulder. I see what you type, and I see what was resulted. Okay? And then we do the stop transcript. Okay? So that's what transcripting is. And now it's a ubiquitous feature. It works everywhere. But the neat thing is that these transcripts can be nested. So here I'll start a transcript, and I'll just say 1. That's our first transcript. And now I'm going to start another transcript. Notice it gives me a second file. Okay, that file is different. And now what I'll do is I'll say, where'd I go? Did I do something wrong? Oh, yeah, sorry. Now I'll do 2. So this is something started. 2s are started in the second transcript. I'm going to do a stop transcript, do it to second, and then a stop transcript first. So I nested the transcripts. And now let's take a look at the second transcript. And you see the 2s. I see all the 2s. And now I'm going to go to the first transcript, and you're going to see the 2s and the 1s. 1s and the 2s. So you see the 1s. You see started the second transcript. You see the 2s. So these can be nested. Now, why is that interesting? And the answer is this. Edit group policy. Here, administrative. We have Windows components. We have Windows PowerShell. And we have a new group policy called turn on PowerShell transcription. And so what you can do is you can enable this and put the transcripts in a directory. So what this is now is a system-wide transcript. Every single person that uses PowerShell using any command at all, or using any script at all, interactive shell, ISE, or a GUI tool which uses PowerShell to do something, it's at the engine level. Every single one of those will now do a transcripting session. And so, it's just wonderful. Everything gets transcribed. In fact, the other day I was in the, we have the speaker room, and so I was in the speaker room, and I left to use the men's room. And when I came back, I saw Russinovich on my machine.
Yeah,
I was like,
good.
wait, what were you doing, dude? And he closed the window really quickly. He says, nothing. I said, well, okay, but I've got transcripting turned on. So let's go find out. So what I had done was I put the transcripts in PS Transactions. Right? So here's what it looks like. So you see, I've had this on for a while. I got a lot of these things. But using the amazing search, SLS, Russinovich, and with search, you can have context that says, give me the matching line, and then give me 5 lines after that. So let's see what we got here. Bing search query. Mark Russinovich hair tips. Measure to measure. Look at how many there were. That guy. So if there's ever any possibility of Mark Russinovich logging into your machine, you're going to want to turn on transcripting to find out what he's up to.
You won't see me searching for that one, Jeffrey.
Okay. Yeah. That's good. Okay, now the last thing I want to show you, there's an amazing amount of stuff, but the last thing I want to show you is classes. So DevOps tools. PowerShell was DevOps before DevOps was cool. If you read the Monad Manifesto, you will see how I describe the need for a single tool which can span the two communities, the community of operators and the community of developers. In the old world, you had different tools and nobody could help one another. With PowerShell, we wanted to have one tool where each team could help one another. Okay, in reality, the first versions of PowerShell were very heavily oriented towards the operators, and then step by step by step, we've been making it more friendly to developers. In this release, we add classes. Developers are going to love classes. Okay, now why is that? So let's be clear. This is what a class looks like in PowerShell version 3. Oh wait, I don't know if you can read that. Let's make that a little bit bigger. So that's what a class looks like, and here's how you create a class now. Okay, so we'll go and show you what that looks like. Okay, so now it's a full .NET class. Okay, now why is that interesting? Well, in the past you've had things that sort of looked like classes, but they weren't, right? So classes allow better robustness and better error handling. So imagine I had a hash table. I've got P1, which is 1, an integer, P2, a string called test, and P3, this date time. Okay, so I set that hash table. I set it to X. And notice now I'm going to take P1, and it's an integer, but now I make it a string. And it's fine to do that. And then I take P3, and I make it a new property. And it's like, oh, wait a second. I didn't have that thing before, but it just let me do it. Just let me add it. And so now if I assign X, I see P1, P2, P3. Oh, I got 2 P3s. One that's spelled out and one that's not. So guess what? That's cool. That's amazing. That's powerful. That's called flexible and agile. And when you want that, great. But sometimes you want to be a little stricter. Like me, I make mistakes all the time. Typically, I'm doing stuff like this. It's a mistake. So I like a little bit more formalism. So here, now I'm also going to show you that you can do it with PS Object. You have a similar set of problems. I'm not going to show you that. But now I'm going to show you how you do it with classes. So I'm going to say class C4. I've got a P1, and I declare that it's an integer. I have P2, and I declare it's a string. And I have a P3, and I declare that it's a date time. And so here, this is the same thing I showed you before. P1 equals 1, P2 equals 3, P3 equals this date time. But I cast it to this class C4, and then we're going to see what happens. Okay, so we do that. I say $X. Okay, yay, that's great. I say, by the way, check this out, $X.P3 add day, add years 10, right? Because it's a It's a real object now. It's no longer a string. I gave it a string, but I converted it to an object. And now let's try and mess with it. Let's make some mistakes. P1 is an integer, but when I try and convert it to a string, it says, no, it's an integer. When I try and add something that's not there, it says, sorry, this class does not have that property. Okay, so very nice. Now the next thing is something called scoping. Okay, there's something called scoping. So here I'm going to have a variable $x. I like x because it's easy to type. And I'm going to say it's called parent scope. And here I'm going to define a function, and I'm going to rename or reassign $x to say local scope, and then I'm going to say print out $x. Okay, so what happens is, and then I'll just run it. And notice it says local scope. What that says is, when I go and I use a variable here, it needs to find the value. And so dynamic scoping says, look in the current scope, and there it is right before, x equals local scope, and use it. If, however, you look in the local scope and it's not there, what's going to happen? And the answer is, it's not an error. It goes up to the parent. Right? It walks up the call stack looking for that variable. That's called dynamic scoping. In classes, most programming languages don't work that way. Most programming classes are lexical scoping. So here I'm going to do the same thing. Now I do it with a class and a function. I renamed x, and I'm going to do the same thing. And I call it, and I get local scope. Happy days. Now, when I get rid of this, or actually, you know what? Here's typically what happens for me. If you're like me, what you do is something like XX. That's your mistake, right? And notice, it's now going to come back and say, you know, no, that variable was not assigned. In fact, if you take a look, you could have told that immediately. You see the squiggle brackets? Because we're now more formal, you get earlier error checking. So when you actually edited the script, it's warning you. Last thing on classes, then we'll get to the product, and that is return values. This is a thing that if you write scripts, a lot of people just, their head explodes. So I write this function which returns 1, and I call it. And then, that works great, but then if I put something in between, like get process, and do that, even though it says return 1, you get the processes and the 1. We merge everything. And the key thing to know in classes is that no longer happens. Now, when you have a return statement, you have to return that type. And it's all about being able to have earlier identification of errors so you can write better code. That's what classes are all about.
Perfect, Jeffrey. Thank you. Sorry, I think we're going to spend a few minutes now just talking about, I think, some of the product and where System Center is going. So I think Jeffrey has Hammer Configuration Manager. How many customers use Orchestrator or Service Management Automation or Azure Automation? Awesome. So it's a good crowd, which is great. So, you know, how we look at about our automation investments going forward is what we're really trying to accomplish is what we talked about in the beginning, which was how do we enable you as IT organization to actually operationalize all of the tasks from all of your infrastructure, your hardware, all the way up to actually the applications that get deployed across those. And the ultimate goal around all of our investments is really giving you the ability to achieve that on-demand delivery of these services to your end user. And so we've had this tenet for the last few years around the first thing you need to be able to do to actually deliver on-demand services is integrate everything in your environment. So that's a core pillar we've had is how do you integrate everything into your environment? And then the next thing was how do you orchestrate everything that you have to touch to deliver those services. A lot of them might be Microsoft systems, but in a lot of cases you're talking to other third-party systems. You might have different service desk solutions, different backup software. You might even be working with different hardware solutions. So how do you actually bring all those together and orchestrate a single process? And then the last thing we always invested in was around automation. How do you actually bring it all together and build a reliable automation solution so you don't have to have all these scripts lying around or your credentials hard-coded into scripts? All of the thing about removing that hard-coded data out of your automation solutions and bringing them into a product. And so, as a lot of you are using, we shipped System Center Orchestrator back in 2012. And it was really designed for the data center IT. So it was kind of there before a lot of the clouds and private clouds came about, and it did a great job of actually operationalize all of the tasks you would do inside your data center. And it continues to do that today. And it really, really works well when you're trying to automate and orchestrate all those tasks that you do day to day and integrate systems together. And it had a really nice user interface. So you saw the graphical authoring associated with it. It was robust. You could actually store all your credentials securely. It had a lot of great features that are continuing to be used now and are continuing to be shipped in R2 and beyond. And so as we started working with a lot of you over the last few years, we've noticed some categories that came up when we started using System Center Orchestrator, and then all the demands you had of that. And the first one's around monitoring remediation. And so there's a bunch of tasks you had to do to actually integrate and deliver automated solutions around monitoring remediation. And then you're also responsible for all this change control and provisioning. And so there's a whole set of automation integration solutions that you've been delivering over the last few years based on that. And then similarly, a lot of us focus a lot on how do we do the patching? How do we do orchestrated patching and keeping all of our servers up and the applications that run on them without having downtime? So how do you patch clustered SQL? How do you walk through your middle tier and your front-end tier? How do you actually organize all of these patching solutions? And so we did a lot of work. You saw some integration packs with SCCM that Orchestrator could actually allow you to do all that patching as well as backup and recovery. But then as we started to look at it and we started to push a lot of our private cloud solutions, and then customers were building their own private cloud solutions, not just on Hyper-V with Virtual Machine Manager, but VMware and OpenStack, then there was a lot more demand on the automation platform inside of System Center. And then we started to see customers adopt Azure, Amazon. It didn't really matter. There's more public clouds coming in. And it just put more and more pressure across Orchestrator to actually be able to manage any of these things. And so what we started to hear from our customers was a bunch of stuff coming in saying, Orchestrator really works well for my data center, but now I'm really under pressure because I need to actually automate all these tasks across my private clouds, across my public clouds, and there's this big push to deliver self-service. And so we've been seeing all these features that come in and these asks across the core engine. Why is the 64-bit support there? Everything's in 32-bit. We got the management questions around, I can't do command line interfaces against my entire feature set. How many people are using our integration packs? The top request is we need more integration packs. We need to keep them updated. We got more and more systems, more and more clouds coming in. And so all of these things just kept on coming in across and demands on Orchestrator. And so it really made us take a step back and say, how do we actually deliver a product that can actually do all the stuff Orchestrator can do, but also is built so that you can actually move forward as you need to adopt these private clouds and these public clouds. And then you saw all the work Jeffrey just went through that PowerShell has been doing, and we said, we already have all this investment. We already have all these great automation tools in the platform, but we really didn't have a great product on top of them. And so we started to look at, okay, what is the core investments we can take from PowerShell, but still give you all those value-added capabilities like storing your credentials, high availability of your scripts, having the ability to author everything centrally, putting some RBAC, role-based access controls on top of this. All of the stuff you need from a product at enterprise level is what we really wanted to deliver. But at the core of it, we wanted to enable all the great platform work that the PowerShell team was doing and bring that forward. And so that's really where you start to see service management automation. And then the sister product, we actually took service management automation and we moved it into Azure to make it a multi-tenant service for our customers as well. And so that's what we delivered as part of System Center 2012 R2 in the automation space. And that was one of the main drivers around moving towards the automation platform and not having to continue to try to fix and iterate Orchestrator because it just wasn't designed to actually meet all of the private public cloud demands of it, especially when we already have a really good, powerful capability inside of PowerShell. And so the great thing about that is when we actually looked at this, we didn't want to go build a brand new product. PowerShell is awesome and then deliver all that stuff. But then we've been hearing for years about all those same list of things that Orchestrator needed. And so we really said, okay, we're going to take the PowerShell as our core, but then we're going to actually try to fix as many of those things we've heard from customers over the last few years. And so I'm not going to go through all the list up here, but you can see all those things I showed before. We actually addressed a lot of these with service management automation. Everything is 64-bit. You get all the PowerShell capabilities built in. Everything has PowerShell command line interfaces to it, so you can move between your staging, your development, your production environments all seamlessly. All of the core capabilities in AST that we've had over Orchestrator, we actually said, let's go through every one of those and see if we can actually fix and address a lot of these inside Service Management Automation and Azure Automation. And there's a bunch more that we've started with, those ones that are kind of the red check mark. I'd say we've done some good work, but there's more work to be done. And then the X ones are ones we're working on as we go forward. And the one I didn't, Jeffrey brought up earlier, and I didn't even put it on the list, was support for PowerShell scripts. I don't know if a lot of you are using Service Management Automation, but PowerShell workflow, is a really powerful language. But if you're very familiar with PowerShell, there's a learning curve. Yep. It has a great set of features. It has that robustness, the parallelism, all those core things you really want in a workflow engine. But there's a bunch of PowerShell out there. You just want to get a task done on a machine. And so the other thing we're looking at, you see over the summer, is actually natively supporting PowerShell scripts as well. And so that will actually come in.
A lot of times what people want to do is they want to start with an existing PowerShell asset and then use that. And then it's fine when you deal with a couple things. And then when you say, oh, now I'm going to parallelize this and have it work across a large set of things, then at that point you'll see where, if and where you need the workflow semantics. And then you can modify the script to say, okay, great, I'll do workflow here and use scripting there.
Yeah, so that's kind of the idea. So you'll see we've done a lot of work inside of there. But the one thing you'll notice is the Orchestrator had some great capabilities, and it still has great capabilities. And so we wanted to look at bringing those forward. So here's kind of where Service Management Automation and Azure Automation kind of stood up as we started to deliver this in part of System Center 2012 R2. So if you looked at the previous slide with Orchestrator, it had a lot of the same capabilities, because those three core tenets of integration, orchestration, automation, all of the tooling you needed around your automation systems, we actually want to make sure we brought that forward. And so we actually have in all these core areas. But what are we working on kind of as we go forward? And so our main goal really is we want to make sure we build an automation product that can actually meet all of your private data center needs, all of your private clouds, as well as your public cloud needs as you start to adopt them. And so that's really where you see a lot of our investments as we go forward, is thinking about how do we build that automation solution and fix all those other issues you've had with Orchestrator and with Service Management Automation, and give you a unified automation solution, automation product as we go forward. And so these are the core tenets we have as we look at what we're doing. And so you can see, with System Center 2016, we're going to make Orchestrator available again. We're going to invest to make sure that works on the latest Windows Server, SQL 14 update our integration packs, and similarly for Service Management Automation. But we really are investing a lot in our cloud service, which is the sister product of Service Management Automation, because that's where we feel if you need to adopt public clouds, you're going to need all those additional capabilities and all that scaling that the cloud can give you that's often difficult to do if you do everything on premises. And so here's a list of all kind of the core features. Hopefully you've seen some of these during the week. Some of these are actually launched in preview right now. And so from the cloud, we can actually go and orchestrate any data center you have in your environment. And we can also orchestrate any other environment you have. If it's AWS, it doesn't really matter if it's Azure. We are really about integrating systems together. That's what we're built for. And that's where you'll see the investments as we go forward. Okay, so I'm going to jump really quick into a demo if I can. Oh, no worries. Oops, that was you. You did go along. Okay, so I'm going to jump in real quick. So this is, have any of you got the Windows Azure Pack deployed in your environment? So there's a few. So this was one of our first takes from Microsoft on actually delivering you kind of a unified private cloud solution based on all the learnings we had in Azure. And so one of the things we wanted to make sure when we shipped that was we could actually back that up with an automation solution so you could bring the Azure Pack into your environment and still integrate everything together. And so this self-service thing we talked about is this is all running on premises. This isn't the Azure portal. I've grayed it out with a different color so you can see. But this was the idea around you want your end users to be able to go to a portal, and if they need new virtual machines, they just get them. And so how they get them is they would just go, new, I just want a standalone virtual machine, just give me a new one. Okay, I'm going to, Do a Mac. Can't be 12 characters, not sure. If I can type my password. Okay, so that was it. So this is what actually the Windows Azure Pack gave you as an IT organization the ability to offer out to your end users. Is they just come in and as they need services, it could be websites, SQL, networks, virtual machines, they just got their spinning up, and when that comes up, they're good to go. And so great, that's very much like you might go to Azure. You just go, I want a VM, go get it. But really what was happening behind the scenes is all of that policy and all of that work to make sure that you could actually maintain that virtual machine. If that was a production-based virtual machine, you just can't have it spinning up and then you have no idea what's going on with it. And so what automation did in part of System Center R2, it gave you the ability to actually add controls and add policies on these artifacts that were getting created by your end users. And so what you had the ability to do, this is the automation, so we're in the admin portal, it gave you the ability to write pure PowerShell workflow to apply policy or do any other task that you needed to do inside that environment. I won't go through all of these, but you can see it just spun up. So what I've done here is actually running. And so what's happening is as that person creates this virtual machine, I can actually go and apply a bunch of policy on that. And so the only, I did a couple of things here, is I want to make sure that we was hooked up to Operations Manager. I'll go into my draft so you can see it. I won't go into all the details. But basically, it's a pretty simple PowerShell script that most of you are familiar with. And it allows you basically to say, OK, when it's done, if we're in a special marketing cloud, then I'm going to apply special policy to that. I'll join to a custom domain, and then I'll install the operations management agent on it. And these are just calling sub-run books as you go forward. And the whole idea was, how do I as an organization still offer self-service, but still make sure that all of the policies and procedures that have to happen on that can actually still take place? And that's really what automation was about at the time. OK, so that's what that would do. And I'm going to touch real quick, because just to give you some flavor on what most of you do today, is you would actually launch up Orchestrator. So this is the Orchestrator interface. And then you would actually apply some other rules and other things on this. And so one of the things you might say is, well, I know that's a really important website, so I'm going to monitor IIS on that environment. And if anything goes wrong, I'm actually going to restart this service, and then I'm going to update my service desk solution. So you could update Service Manager to say, I tried to remediate it, and here's the action I took. So you also get that auditing across what was happening in your environment. And this could be across any set of remediations that Operations Manager might give you. It was very simple in Orchestrator to tie in all these systems together with just literally this nice drag and drop interface. But I'm going to jump over real quick, and I'm going to show you the Operations Management Suite. So have anyone seen this? Was talked about during the keynotes. This is our new offering that came out. And this was our cloud-based offering around Operations Management Suite and bringing all of those core capabilities we've been working on inside of System Center and Windows Server from the cloud. So the one thing I'm not going to go show you, but you'll see automation is a core tenet of this new solution. And if you go into the pricing real quick, you'll actually see down here, so if you already have System Center, you can actually get this starting in July as part of the System Center investments you've already done, so you can take advantage of all these capabilities. But I'm going to jump in real quick and just show you, here's what the dashboard looks like. This is the new OMS, is what I'm calling it, dashboard. And so here what's happening is you get a view into all the different systems, and it brings all those logs together. So here you can see alert management is actually available inside of our system. If I actually went in and saw the data sources, you would actually see that we've actually connected a bunch of management groups up here. And so before you might be managing all these individual management groups and taking remediation, you can actually aggregate all of that data together and all of your servers across any cloud, any OS, into one place. And if I drilled into these alerts, you saw I had some 6 alerts. You can see the website's unavailable, and I actually might want to go and remediate it. So you can see how Orchestrator might do that using those nice activities, and if the website went down, it would actually go and try to remediate. But I'm going to jump over. You saw at the home page that we now have automation as part of this solution right here. And if you open it up, you'll see it brings you into our automation portal that's up and hosted inside of Azure. And I have some runbooks in here that I'm going to touch on real quick. So I wrote a runbook called Monitor OMS IIS Servers. And I'm just going to start it real quick, and we'll see if we have time. So this is managing this is our Baconland domain. So this is a domain inside of a separate organization. This is not on the internet, not available. This is running your data center. It could be running anywhere, but it's a lockdown environment. But what we have a new feature.
That sounds like a great amusement park.
It does, isn't it? I didn't come up with it, but it is pretty cool.
Let's go to Baconland.
So has anybody heard about our hybrid worker? We've talked about a little bit of this, but inside of our automation service now, we actually have the ability to integrate into all of your on-premises environments as well. And so what you end up doing is you just have to lay down the runbook worker inside your environment. It's actually delivered through OMS. So that direct agent you have in your environment, you can actually enable our hybrid workers on the machines you need. So typically you'd have one or two, just like you would in Orchestrator or SMA. And then I can actually kick this off, and what it will do is go ahead and look across that Baconland domain for these websites that are not running based on a search that's done against the OMS data. So I'm going to click on Edit real quick. And here you can see our graphical authoring experience that is up inside of our automation service. And so a lot of times you actually want to be able to visualize what's going on, what is my process, and take action based on that. And so I'm doing some very simple things here, like I'm getting the credentials. So all of our credentials are stored securely inside of our assets. So here you can see I have some Bacon credentials and I have some OMS credentials. I log this out so I know who took the action. And then I authenticate against the OMS. And how do I do that? All you need to do is have a module, and I wrote one real quick since they just launched their API, that allows for integration into the OMS API and actually perform tasks against it. And so this is just a small PowerShell module that I wrote within a day. And what the nice thing about the extensibility of PowerShell is you can write that and then you import that into the system. This happens in service management automation today. So all those challenges you've had with integration packs and the version isn't right and this keeps updating, when do I get the next one out? That problem has really been addressed when you think about it because we bet on PowerShell. Because Jeffrey was talking about how many commandlets are out there. It's not just that, it's how many modules are out there from not just Microsoft but all the vendors. You mentioned VMware. They have a great PowerShell CLI that they can actually manage the entire vSphere with PowerShell.
Yeah, right. Cisco, amazing stuff from Cisco, EMS, our EMC. All the vendors have great PowerShell support.
They do, and it's awesome because what that allows you to do is you just literally pick up that module and you can import it into our automation service, and now you can integrate and manage all of those systems. It was funny, I was doing an AWS one, and I was like, oh, is there an AWS one? I went up to the Amazon AWS. They had like 600 or 700 commandlets available to manage the entire EC2. I literally just zipped it up, imported to our system, and I could fully manage AWS inside of our environment. And I didn't do any work. I just literally started bringing some activities over.
I didn't get to the booth, but somebody told me that Rackspace had a bunch of PowerShell support as well.
It is, and if there isn't one, you can just write one. And so if I won't show you this, but if you opened up what this module was, all I'm doing is actually I'm calling invoke REST method against it, and then I'm authenticating because they don't have a module yet because they just released the API. And so I can release out this module, but I'm sure there's one coming because we just launched now. But all it's doing, I won't go spend a lot of time on it, but you can see it just authenticates against Azure. Then I get the OW workspace. I get the subscription. I return all the servers. So this is the search OMS. And so what this is doing is actually searching the OMS, that API, looking for any servers that have IIS down. And how you do that is you can put in PowerShell queries. But here you can see the data bus that Orchestrator has. And so I authenticated earlier into that system, how you can actually use that inside of the commandlets. These are like the input values that you need. You just go to activity output, and everything that was available to you that you've processed earlier is now available to you on the data bus. And then all you do is point and click. So we had this great thing in Orchestrator called form-based authoring that customers liked because you literally were kind of form-based authoring and you could integrate all these systems together and you focus more on the data flow through the system than on actually how you integrate it. And a very similar concept here is available. But this nice thing about this is it's all built on PowerShell. And so as the modules come in, everything just works. And so that's how the data bus works in the new system. Okay, I'm going to jump back out of here and go back to the slides real quick.
Okay,
you're going to, Jeffrey, go.
I'm going to zoom through this. So we've had lots of conversations around desired state configuration, lots of information available on the web. Let me zoom through it and kind of tee up the key issue. Desired state configuration allows a declarative way for you to express how you'd like your systems, and then you make it so. Okay? Now, the basic idea is this three-stage model. At the heart of it is the center. It's the desired state configuration document. This is a standards-based document called a MOF, and it tells you, the system, what it should be like. That then gets handed to this make it so phase. I call it the make it so manager. And then that takes that document and calls a number of resources to then make it so. So then the question is, well, how did I get that document? And here's the platform play. The answer is any way you want. It's an ASCII text document. You could have created it with VI. You could have created it with Emacs. You could create it with Notepad. Now, PowerShell version 4 and PowerShell version 5 have language extensions that make it easy to create these documents, but our third-party vendors can produce these documents directly, or they can call PowerShell to have them use that. So you can do it any way you want. Now, the question is then, how did that document get to the system? In this, go back one, in the push model, someone from the left-hand side created that document and pushed it to the server, using WSMan. However, and you'll find that that's a great way to go test things out. You're in a lab, you want to go test things, but in a very large scale-out system, you really want to have what's called a pull model. The pull model, you've configured the endpoints to be able to go to a pull server. It uses a REST API, and then it then gets the configuration meant for it to make it so. However, what you will find is that setting up that pull server is quite a challenge. So again, the model here is you've got these configuration scripts, PowerShell declarative. It's an integration of declarative and imperative scripting that you then run to produce these node configuration files, these MOF configuration files. You have one of those per node, and then they get applied to the nodes via a push or a pull mechanism. And with that.
Great. Okay, so I'm going to jump through kind of a demo real quick just on this so you can kind of see how it works. I'm not even going to, well, I'll sign in real quick. But I'm going to open up the ISE while I'm waiting. Okay, I'm going to sign in as myself. And what you'll notice, if you try to create a virtual machine inside of Azure today, you can actually select the automation DSC service. And when you select the automation DSC service, you can tell every single virtual machine to actually point to our new automation service to get all of their configuration. And that's what I've done here. I've actually configured the virtual machine to pull its configuration from our new automation service. And the nice thing about that, it isn't just Azure VMs. Any machine that's out there can actually point to our service and get the configuration.
So even if it's AWS?
AWS, on-premises, anything that can reach our service endpoint, you can now manage them at scale and push all the configuration down. And so that's kind of one of the most powerful things you'll see. And if I go, these are the new commandlets that we've shipped inside of our automation service. You can see here, I can get the node if I want to do something to it. And it'll tell me what state's going on. So I can see I have this Ignite demo machine and it's compliant. And so if it wasn't compliant, so if someone had changed something and I couldn't get it back, we now have all of that reporting infrastructure in place. So you can just go to that machine and tell me, is it compliant or not? And you can actually make it so, as you know, as well.
Right. So with desired state configuration, you both make it so, but then you can monitor things. So if someone comes in and accidentally changes something or intentionally changes something, you can detect that and either report on it or report and auto-correct it.
Yep, and so here's how, this is a standard DSC script I just wrote really quick for the demo. But you can see here what it's doing is actually defining the node, my Ignite demo, and it's saying I want, IIS enabled, I want the ASP.NET 4.5 enabled, I want the management tools, and it actually also goes and creates a website. So typically you would author this using PowerShell, and you would script it all out in workflow, and you can get it done. But the configuration based, once you author it, you just tell the DSC agent, go do all this work. And I actually copy files over. So this is usually what a dev would do in a DevOps scenario. And then, of course, I install the Operations Insight agent. Because this is the type of stuff you might do as an IT person to say, yes, you go ahead and do everything, but I also want the management capabilities on top of this.
Yeah, and because it's an ASCII text file, you can check it into source code control, you can version it, you can compare the current version against previous versions.
Yep, and then if I wanted to actually apply that, I just import it into the automation service, and I compile the job. And what that's going to do is it's actually, you can see it went to new, and then about in a minute or two, it's actually going to compile that and make it available for all the nodes that are looking for the updated configuration. So it gives you full control to actually define configuration, and then every node from 1 to 1,000 will get the exact same configuration you specified. And so they're not going to drift because you now are responsible for the machine from the IT organization. And you can add in your own policy. The development teams may add in theirs, and then you would add in some more because you can all work off the same configuration and the same common language between this DevOps scenario. And so that's really what this is about. And if I see if I can get the job real quick. Yep, we've moved to activating. I'm going to just go into my server just so you can see what it's doing. So here's my Ignite demo. And actually what I do in my demo, I won't show it now, is I actually push all of my content from Visual Studio all the way through to Visual Studio Online, and then update the configuration and pulls that information directly down.
Oh, cool.
So it does a full end-to-end. But for this scenario, let me see if I've actually got any updated. So there's a command in PowerShell called update DSC configuration. So this will look every 30 minutes looking for configuration because it's a pull mechanism. But if you wanted to test it out, you can actually remote into the machine and just see if there's anything new available. And so there's nothing available because the compilation job has probably not finished. And so if I just run that again, which one did I, here we go. So it's running, so it's almost done. I'd say it's be done in about 30 seconds. And then I can do is rerun that command again, and I actually see that there's a new configuration available for it, and try to apply it.
Yeah, so just again, to get this in focus. So what we've done is we've gone and, is it ready?
Yep. Oh, that's quick.
I won't give you an overview.
I know. Let me just see if it actually picks it up now.
And
there it is. So you can see all that stuff that we're doing. Is the Windows features enabled? Is ASP.NET? It's downloading the agent, all of it, but it's not applying it all because I didn't really change anything. But if I actually updated any of the content inside of there, it would actually find the new content for the website and apply it automatically. And so when I refresh that web page, it would automatically take it from Visual Studio and make it available for the DSC to take the new stuff.
Yeah.
And it's done. Okay, good. I'm going to stop. I think we have one slide left, and we will go back to that. And there's a bunch of sessions on DSC. So if you haven't seen the work we're doing on the DSC, there's a bunch that the PowerShell team have done, and then we've done some from the automation side to show the integration. So if you're interested in all the DSC work, there's some great presentations during the week that go a lot deeper into all of this.
And then Jason Helmlich and I did a Microsoft Virtual Academy on desired state configuration. So it's 2 days worth of video training available for free. Just search for my name, DSC, MVA, you'll find it.
Yeah, there's just I think one of the takeaways there's a lot happening in the DSC space right now, and we're really working close to actually get it right. But it's very early from us. It's like a preview. You'll see we don't have all of the user experience in there, and so we're really looking for feedback. And so if you're interested in DSC, even configuring your hardware or your VMs or the applications, give us feedback, and we want to make sure we bring it in. Okay, so how is our investments? I have this last slide. It really is only here to kind of show you how we're thinking about investing in automation and making that available over time for all of you. And so you'll see one of the reasons we're doing most of our development in the cloud right now is it allows us to iterate really quick. Jeffrey talked about this agile model we're moving towards. It's happening with the Windows Management Framework. You see updates happening very frequently up there, getting feedback, iterating. We're doing same in System Center model, is we're moving some of our things into the cloud so we can iterate with you, get the feedback, and actually try to deliver the solution you need in a faster cadence than we've done in the past. And so a lot of these things ship out of band. We're not waiting for the big releases. We do obviously align with the big releases, and so you get all those core capabilities, but we want the feedback all the way through so we can ship in those and then also ship outside.
Can I say that's a muscle that we all have to develop? You know, we're used to the model where we go talk to you for a little bit and then we go off and we develop code and then we release it to you and some of you decide to pick it up and you beta test it and then everybody else picks it up a year later. That's no longer the model. The model is we are actively listening to you. Again, it comes from the top. Satya, he's absolutely passionate that we make sure you use our products, are successful with our products, and that you love our products. So we want to change the engagement with you. So we're releasing things smaller, more often, and then actively listening. You know, maybe you've given some feedback in the past and felt it hasn't been heard or been reflected in the product. I encourage you to re-engage with us. I think you'll see that we're very, very responsive.
Yeah, so here's kind of the key takeaways is, you know, we saw some of the stuff we talked about. Where is the technology going? Where are you telling us you're going and your needs inside of your own organization? So we're really trying to embrace that feedback and move you towards the cloud, embracing private, public clouds, as well as modern management. And the other thing is there's a lot of PowerShell tooling available, so use the right tool for the right job. Use scripting when scripting is appropriate, use DSC when it's appropriate, and then use the products we deliver from System Center to really give you that unified management at scale across all the different services you have in your organization. And so with that, I think don't
forget Linux. And again,
Linux.
We are
you see down here.
Or a heterogeneous solution.
It is, and we actually have Linux support coming out in automation. So you'll have SSH support coming out, as well, Jeffrey mentioned earlier, Linux onto DSC. Okay, so with that, I'm going to lead this up, and we're going to end the, we have like a couple of minutes left. Maybe we can take a couple of questions.
3 minutes if you use the microphones.
If you use the microphones, but I'll let everybody else go. And again, really appreciate you coming to this session. It's great to kind of get your feedback. Come on up and tell us what you're looking for. And I know Jeffrey driving it across Windows Server System Center, and we're trying to deliver from the automation team. So thanks, everyone.
So I think the guy in the back was first.
Yeah, hey, so I'm looking at standing up Orchestrator for the first time in my environment, and I was talking to a guy after the party last night. He's like, oh no, you don't want to use Orchestrator. You want to switch over to SMA because they're not going to develop Orchestrator anymore. Can you kind of help clarify that a little for me on whether I should be pursuing Orchestrator or whether I should be using one of these other systems that you just outlined?
Yeah, so Orchestrator will be available inside 2016. But, you know, you saw kind of the core challenges with Orchestrator from an architecture standpoint. It does really well for those tasks it's good at. But as you start to expand out and use automation across your organization, private or public, you know, it really wasn't built for some of those capabilities. And so it's kind of a question on, you know, what are you going to be doing with it? Is it very kind of inside your traditional data center? Or do you think you and your organization may grow to adopt private cloud, public clouds in the future? And if they do, I would actually, if you think it's the second one, I would start to look towards service management automation, but I would really look towards Azure automation, the automation we have inside of OMS. Because that is where you're going to see the unification. You saw the graphical authoring. You may like that and use it for certain things. That's available up there, as well as all the PowerShell capabilities up there as well.
Okay, and did you say that it's going to be summer time frame, you're going to potentially release some sort of UI for the SMA stuff?
So all of our investments right now are going into the online version of automation. So that's where you saw where I demoed up there. That's everything is online, because that's early days as well. Like Orchestrator took years to get that right. We've taken a lot of those learnings, but it's a brand new product up there, and so we're looking for feedback. And so once we get that right, then we can look to see how do we make it available, you know, down level. We're not tying ourselves to any of the big releases because we can ship out of band now. One of these things like Jeff talked with WMF, we can do the same inside a System Center, inside of our update roll-ups. You know, we're not going to release it until it's ready, and we can innovate a lot faster in the cloud than we ever could with delivering it on premises.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Thanks.
I have two questions. First is about Service Manager. So in the past few days, we've heard not too much about Service Manager, and what we've heard is primarily in the context of provisioning and automation from a virtual machine and cloud management perspective. Very little about incident and change management, which are kind of the traditional service desk scenarios. So if you could speak to that. And the second request I had is regarding a roadmap. So I understand completely the rapid pace of change and a lot of teams working, in parallel. But a roadmap would be nice where we can see, what the 12-month and 16-month and, short-term and long-term future holds. Thank you.
Yep. No, those are good questions. We get asked quite a bit. So on the service manager side, it is used for all of those core capabilities, like you said, around change, incident, help desk scenarios. And it's gotten a lot of investment over the last year. You've probably been involved in a lot of the update roll-ups. But they're mostly at a performance, like the system really need to be invested in to meet that scale. And so that's really where a lot of the work has been going on, is the platform level. The reason there's a lot of talk around the provisioning, and because a lot of what we look at from service managers are around the core capabilities inside the data center as well, and how do we actually make sure those data center scenarios are delivered. And that's why you see this very tight integration between service manager and our automation platform. And we really try to highlight how you can deliver self-service from the data center. But the other core capabilities are still there, and there is investments going on. It's just not as much investments right now that we're doing on the data center side, that we might be doing more that way on the client side, which is where those other ones show up. But it will be available in 2016, but that's where our core kind of investments are heading right now.
Got it. And how about the roadmap?
So the roadmap is a good question. I mean, really, when you think about a roadmap, we try to give you some visibility into like 2016. That's really what these slides are talking about. But one of the things we've changed is this agile model. And in all honesty, we have a platform architecture thing that Jeffrey and a lot of your team work on how we build up over the few years. But what are the actual solutions and the products? That is very agile.
Yeah, honestly, the way to think about that is in an agile world, plans are, it's sort of headlight scheduling. You schedule out to the headlights, and the headlights are really sort of a month. So we know what we're going to do next month, and then the month after that, honestly, will be a combination of the things we think we are going to do, but attenuated by what we're hearing from customers, because we're constantly going to be listening to customers. So if I thought I was going to do this and this and this, but then all of a sudden I got customers come and saying, hey, this is a real opportunity or this is a real problem, we will adjust. We won't do those other things in order to address that customer feedback. So basically, when it comes to roadmaps, you can kind of get directions. Like, here we are in Chicago, and we're going to go west. Now, are we going to end up in San Diego or San Francisco or Seattle? Well, we're going to see, but we know we're going west. So we're first going to get through Kansas. That's enough.
The challenge is, I'm from CDW. We are a system integrator, and customers come to us and say, where's Microsoft going with, Orchestrator or Service Manager? And it's almost like reading tea leaves these days to say, all right, we think this is what's going to happen in service management, automation, and all that, but there's not like a clear direction. That's what I'm getting at.
Well, can I say, I think that in my view, my view has always been plans are just plans. What really matters, the best predictor of what's going to occur is people's motivations. And I think we've been really clear about our motivations, why we're investing, what we're investing in, et cetera. So then, from there, you can kind of make predictions, but then as things change, which is to say problems arise or new opportunities, our motivations will always give you a clear guidance as to what we're going to do about that. So our motivations are, we want to make it easier for people to adopt our innovation and use our technology and be more successful with it for cloud scenarios. So you can predict we're going to invest heavily in running things in the cloud because it allows us to innovate more rapidly, listen to our customers better, et cetera. And you're going to see that we want to meet all of our customers' needs, whether they're using our technology on premises, our hypervisor, our Azure Stack, or they've decided to use VMware or OpenStack, or they're using somebody else's public cloud. So we want to meet all of our customers' needs and do it rapidly. So that's our motivation, and you can make a set of predictions from there. We can make a set of predictions, but they will vary based upon the feedback we get from customers.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
That one's yours.
Quick question. Do you see the PowerShell language moving more into the same space that Python is going, more scientific community adopting that, or instead of being like, it looks like a really IT-oriented language, but do you see it moving in other areas out of that and being like a full-fledged .NET language, C# or F#? Or
Yeah, so we definitely see it being more of a full .NET language. But primarily our motivation is in customers managing their systems. So, you know, if somebody came up to me and said, hey, you know, we're looking for a fast Fourier transform module, I'd probably say the community might develop one of those. They might not. They're probably going to do it in Python. If you come to me and say, hey, I need a better way to manage these switches, well, chances are I'm going to invest in that one. So, you know, my philosophy on technology is water finds its level. People use things that it's useful for. So at some point, people wanted to say, oh, you know, PowerShell should be positioned this way. It's like, you position it any way you want. People are going to use it for what it's useful for. So if it's useful for something, they're going to use it for that.
Okay, because I see it more transitioning from more the IT to even now to the business problem solving, because it's a great language to quickly solve some of the business problems.
Oh, let's be clear. If you go back 10, 15, 20 years ago, people were using traditional scripting languages to do business integration right, left, and center. So yes, absolutely. Now, you mentioned scientific computing. There's particular characteristics that I don't know that we're particularly great at. But certainly for business integration, anything that requires gluing things together. Systems administration is one thing that glues things together. Business logic, business applications are another. Sure.
On your far left. Can you give some example? Your left.
Sorry, thank you.
Oh, the far left.
Yeah.
Way over here.
Way over here. Can you give some examples or scenarios where we'd use like the VM extension, the PowerShell DSC VM extension over Azure Automation to deliver the configuration?
So the question was around how do we, the VM extension that's up in Azure today, the DSC extension that ships there?
Yeah, correct.
I didn't show, but if you go into the portal, you'll see that there's now an automation DSC that shows up.
Right. I'm just kind of looking for scenarios or examples of where you would use, push the config through the VM extension over using Azure Automation to push the...
I think it's a one-time versus ongoing. So
Okay.
the one time you push the DSC configuration, that's a one-shot, sort of initial configuration. One of the things you'd want to do is to set up an initial configuration that says, now get subsequent configurations from this DSC pull server. So they work together that way.
Yeah, that's actually all that happens initially when you set up the automation DSC now. It'll just tell it what's your name of configuration you want, and it doesn't do any configuration. It just tells the DSC agent, go talk to our pull service. And then you have all the management, so now you can actually write your own configuration, apply it to that node, and the next time it checks in, it'll pull down its initial configuration, but every time you do an update, like you saw my example where maybe the website got updated, or the ports have to be changed, or any kind of update that might have to happen, you will push that through the configuration, and then it will stay there as well.
All right, so with the VM extension, that's a one-time. When the VM comes up for the first time, that's the only time you get to use it.
Yeah, other than that, you have to push all the time, whereas now with the pull service, you never have to do that. You can fully manage it inside the automation service.
Great. Thank you.
Are we here?
My company, it's a VMware shop. So there is a big demand in the company where we want to do provisioning so that I'm able to deliver, a VM using SMA. Mm-hmm. So I'm not able to find any good solution. How can I do that? I was able to integrate the VMware integration pack in the orchestrator.
Yep.
It's not that good enough. So is there any way?
Yeah, so there's the way I would look at it, there's the Power CLI PowerShell module from VMware. You're probably familiar with that.
Yeah.
And so that basically gives you full PowerShell management capabilities on top of vSphere and VMware. And so inside of SMA now, you can have access to all that PowerShell. And what you would do is you would install the PowerShell Power CLI module from VMware onto the Runbooks workers inside of SMA. And then when you can centralize and author everything just using regular PowerShell, and then when they run, they will actually, you can spin up VMs, you can attach disks, you can do whatever you want to do against vSphere using those modules. But all of the reporting, all of the high availability, all of the centralization, removing all those things are centralized inside of SMA.
Thank you.
Yep.
My questions are related to the whole d- desired state configuration, basically. And it might be because this isn't a deep diving course, but I get that the creation of the MOF files is simple. But are you guys thinking of some sort of configuration management way of making sure that you can profile groups of those and then look for redundancy? Because I just didn't see any of that in the demo, and I could see that growing quite outlandish as you start, throwing out images across an enterprise. And then a second question would be, it's very exciting to be able to have see the exceptions after after MOF has been made it so per se. What kind of ways are you looking to, from a business intelligence standpoint, let the end user know what the exceptions are and maybe tracking those for remediation?
You want to tackle
Yeah, I'll
first
talk
one?
about
I
the
can
first
tackle
one.
second
So the first one is the set of abstract. So you're exactly right on both points. Right now, on the first one, we have it's one of the benefits of the declarative-based approach that we have. So if you drill into the details of desired state configuration, we separate what's called environmental information from structural information. And the idea is that structural information you want to be the same across all the nodes, and then anything that varies you then put into this environment information. So concretely, the most common scenario is I have the structure that I want to make so, and in a development environment, I have 2 nodes and here's their information. In a test node, I have 20 nodes. In test environment, I have 20 nodes and here's their configuration. And in a production environment, I have 200 nodes and here's their information. But that structural information stays the same.
Okay.
So that's one thing.
Okay.
And then the other question was around the auditing.
and stuff
And we've got a number of mechanisms there, and we're adding to that. So in this new version that's coming out, I think just came out, what you can do is you can produce that MOF, and you can run it against a system in a test mode to say, tell me what would have happened if I applied this. And it'd say, these things are in compliance, these things aren't.
And the one thing you'll see with our automation service is, because it's a pull service, they actually report everything back to our automation service now. So every time something changes and gets checked again, all of those results are centralized in our automation service. And then through role-based access control, you can give access out to the different users to say, okay, here's what changed inside your environment.
That's brilliant. Yeah, that role-based access is exactly where I'd be looking, because that's
Perfect.
who you want to divvy up who
Yeah,
sees what.
it's not there. We're working on it right now because, as you saw, we're just released this stuff. But over the next few months, you'll see that come up
Right,
because
but
the core pieces.
I already have the desire for it, so totally.
That's great.
Great.
Thanks.
Awesome. Okay, thank you.
Hey, you know what? Our
we're
great
getting-
show staff has endured us being on stage 12 minutes beyond our allotted time. We need to let them go get some lunch. But Eamon and I will be up here if you want to come up. Thanks. Sorry about that.